Good day to you, and why would I do something so insensitive as to wear a t shirt that says Corona during a coronavirus pandemic? I mean, wouldn't it be strange for me to walk into some groups of people and have this shirt on? Would they not be a little bit freaked out by it? Superstitious people, for example? People who have a natural inclination that this disease that's in the United States has come from another country, even though it's not China, Mexico being associated with corona. Lots of different reasons not to wear this t-shirt, but I'm wearing it. Why is that? And like many other Americans, you will be wearing a t-shirt and may not say Corona, it might, but it might also say Corona. Yeah, you may be wearing a t-shirt that is a brand of a product, and it doesn't matter what your race or your ethnicity is. We all do it in the United States. It doesn't matter your income. That's part of being an American, is wearing branded clothing. And so what makes us Americans? That's the question I'm trying to get to, is what makes us Americans? That's what we're going to take on today. The official title of the chapter is Dominant U.S. Cultural Patterns. And you think you know what those are because you've grown up in the United States. You have, as the book calls it, emic knowledge. E-M-I-C comes from the root ending of a word like pandemic. Emic is that's where that word's coming from. It's sort of the root of American society. You think that you have emic knowledge from inside of the U.S. because you're living here. You may not have been born here like some of you in the class. Others of you have, but you think you have that emic knowledge. But it's amazing, is it not, what you can learn about yourself when you compare yourself with other countries. And ideally, to be able to travel to other countries, that's when you really start learning what it means to be an American. But you can also gain that knowledge by what we're talking about today, which is etic knowledge, right? Etic knowledge is the opposite of emic knowledge. It's knowledge that's learned from the outside. That's what we know about countries that we haven't been to by virtue of studying those countries in classes and talking to people. So let's get to know the U.S., so to speak, right? Even though we live here, it is the third largest nation. Did you know that? Yeah, it's behind Canada, is the biggest nation in the world, and then following that is the former Soviet Union, which is Russia. Just to give an example, Russia has 11 time zones. Yeah, 11 time zones. Canada, largely the biggest country because it has all those icy regions, but the U.S. is the third biggest. And yet its media kind of position the United States as being the biggest country in the world because our media are exported more than any other country all around the world. I'm talking about Hollywood films. You can see them in the smallest villages in Africa, etc. So the U.S. has a larger than life presence around the world compared with the actual size of the country and certainly the population, which is around 333 million people compared to India with 1.3, I think it is, and China's even higher, billion. That's billion. So let's talk about the origins of U.S. cultural patterns. The origins, and I have to say, I come out into my yard here in Pennsylvania, and I'm in awe of the fact that probably Native Americans, which we know is not a preferred term, but nations of indigenous peoples will probably cross them through here at some point, right? I mean, East Stroudsburg University has 4 dormitories named after nations, right? Indigenous nations. Got the Lenape, Shawnee, Mincy. I forget the other one, but we have 4 on campus, and we're actually we're planning to, before the pandemic, highlight those nations more with signage around campus and historical notes. I mean, we should, right? That's all we have is just the names. What do we know about? We know the Lenape lived down by the Delaware River, but this part of the chapter gets into origins of U.S. cultural patterns is starting in our native indigenous populations, primarily the Iroquois Nation, which operated just around Buffalo, New York, and on in that region, and sort of the northeast, but not complete east, like in Maine, like up around Buffalo, Adirondacks, and down into some parts of Pennsylvania. They were the most important, biggest nation, and they weren't savages as Native Americans are often portrayed. They actually had a political system developed before they had contact with the Europeans who came to the U.S. And this political system was designed to maintain peace with other tribes, with other nations, through an official constitution, an oral constitution. And I think that's very interesting. And actually, you can see that the Iroquois influenced the Articles of Confederation, which is the precursor to our U.S. Constitution. in the 1700s. The Iroquois, by the way, were not without hostilities. They were called rattlesnakes by people of other nations, but they preferred to call themselves people of the Long House because of the style of housing that they used to build. Okay, so now we're going to move to a section called European Enlightenment. European Enlightenment, and I'm keeping my eye on the sun there. If it starts to bleach out the photo, I'm going to move. So in European Enlightenment, we have an influx of immigration from Europe, and that's where the U.S. becomes a melting pot, so to speak. And along with the Europeans, we're talking about the Spanish, we're talking about, not so much the Spanish, we're talking about the English first, and we're talking about Italians, Irish, and then Eastern Europeans, and Scandinavians went to parts of the U.S. like Minnesota. So we have a lot of Europeans coming here, and they brought with them scientific method, which we like in our country. They brought with them democracy, and they brought with them capitalism. And they started to make the U.S. what is known as a U.S. melting pot. The Puritans were one particular group that had a profound influence on culture. They came from Eastern England to Massachusetts on the ship, the Mayflower, right, in the 1600s. You should go see it sometime if you haven't already. And the Puritans introduced the idea to this country that everybody is born evil. We'll talk about that later in the class, with sins, but you can be turned to the good side. All right, so yeah, I am experiencing some sun here that's going to make it more difficult for you to see the video, so I'm going to keep moving on here and talking, even though I may be talking through some shade here. So Puritans, they settled in New England. And then other than them, we had a kind of royalist elite people who were definitely of blue blood in England. And they came and they settled in the Chesapeake. And particularly they were concentrated in Virginia. And that's why in Virginia you do have sort of a regal feel to it when you go to Virginia. It has a grandiosity to it, which is related to this heritage that it has. Okay, next up I want to talk about how the Quakers, they came from England's north, and they actually settled a lot of the Poconos, right? A lot of the Poconos were visited by the Quakers. I shouldn't say settled, they settled in Quaker Town, and they settled in Philadelphia, but they used to come to the Poconos. They were known as people who did not appreciate ostentatious lifestyle. That's against the grain of their religion, so they would vacation in modest means in Pocono resorts. Yeah, all along the Water Gap. That's the history there of tourism, is the Quakers coming here. Oop. Excuse me. All right, I'd like to continue on now. Actually, various researchers have divided up our country into pockets. We talk about the Mid-Atlantic region, we talk about the South, we talk about the Northeast, etc. And we have pockets of cultures. Like you can go to Appalachia and you can find people that seem like they have just come off the boat from Scotland. They're still living in the mountains of Tennessee. The U.S. and incorporating slavery into the United States is a massive cultural change shift, which we are still trying to sort out today, obviously, through the racial tensions and the discussions that we have going on. Our country is just flat out not homogeneous. That's what we're trying to get at. We're not like Japan, which we studied in last class. It's not a homogeneous country. There was a Frenchman. He was an aristocrat. His name was Alexis de Tocqueville. You might have talked about him in your public education high school. He toured the United States, and he said what he saw was not one country. He saw individual nations. And, you know, my dad, he used to say to me, the U.S. is not really a country. It's really 50 states searching for a nation. You can kind of see that in the coronavirus pandemic, right? You see so many different styles of responding to this. We just hired a faculty member. She drove out here from Washington, the state of Washington. She said every state that she drove through had different rules for how to wear a mask. So there were some researchers, Anderson, Lustig, and Anderson, in 1987. They divided up the country according to communication behaviors, and they found that New Englanders, see if this rings true for those of you who have family and friends in these areas of the country, New Englanders were more likely to be introverts. Mid-Atlantic people, that's us, that's Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, Mid-Atlantic people, are not particularly talkative. And then people from these specific states, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, they visit with neighbors more than we do on the East Coast. I used to live in Texas, and I don't know if I'm self-fulfilling prophecy here, but yeah, we were visiting with our neighbors all the time down there, and much more than we did when we moved to Pennsylvania. New Englanders have a more reserved communication style. They hold back their feelings. Southerners have a slower communication style. Got to be careful with that word there. We're not saying Southerners are slower. We're saying their communication is slower. Now let's move towards forces towards development of a dominant culture. What makes a U.S. person an American? And de Tocqueville, the Frenchman, he predicted that the U.S. would be a great power because of its geographic size. It's huge, third biggest in the world. Abundant national resources. We have deserts, we have oil, we have coasts, we have marshes, we have mountains, we have snow, we have rain, we have ice. We've got just about all of it. We don't have a Caribbean. I'll say that. That's why we go to the Caribbean, right? But because of all this and a growing population, that it would be a powerhouse. And he was right. So what are some of the developments that help facilitate the U.S. coming together as a nation and blending all these peoples that we've discussed? Indigenous peoples, European peoples, people from slavery. How's it coming together? Well, a big event was in 1825, the opening of the Erie Canal, as in Erie, Pennsylvania. And it helped New York grow as a financial and corporate capital. It started to feed New York so that you could get goods up and down throughout New York. And you didn't have to put them onto horses. And that opened up basically commerce. And then another big event was the defeat of the South and putting to an end eventually slavery. And then the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment going along with this because they all established national citizenship as opposed to citizenship to Pennsylvania or to another state. Another event that at least Fred Yonts believes plays a role in our national character is Teddy Roosevelt was a president. And he had a banner that he used to talk about, banner not like in the internet today, but overall heading to the way that he talked. And he talked about a new nationalism, which was an active government at the national level. And sort of what he's known for is national parks. Teddy Roosevelt established a lot of national parks. And that's, again, we're trying to bring together 50 different states into the idea of being Americans. We can also say that the Immigration Restriction Act of 1924, which allowed immigration into this country at that time under certain quotas, that also put to rest individual states and made it a national policy that was growing the country. We can say the automobile, when that was developed, that gave mobility. Finally, this big country could be traversed. And that's sort of the way that we have handed over travel in this country. We haven't developed our trains, not like Europe. All over Europe, you can just go hop on a bus and then take you to the nearest train station. That train station hooks up with a bigger train station. Soon you're on your way to one of many different other countries or the rest of the world if you want without even really planning your journey. We don't have that. We rely on the automobile. The automobile has great presence. Everybody in this class probably is working very hard to keep your automobile. Well, maybe not everybody, but there's a lot of pressure for that. Also big events such as the Great Depression, that was a big factor in our country, bringing us together, getting the national government involved in Social Security. World War II, bringing the country together to fight the oppression of Nazi Germany. And the Cold War, if you know about that, between the Soviet Union and the U.S. and the standoff between two nuclear powers for many years without a shot being fired. So all of these things have added to our national character. And it's really incredible that we have such uniformity. That people will be wearing Corona shirts, black, white, Asian, Latino, might be wearing a Corona shirt, rich, poor, etc. We have a lot of uniformity in this country, but at the same time, we have a lot of difference in the clothing, the way that people dress in the South versus the North versus the West for sure. Different food around the country, different artifacts that people make. You go out to New Mexico, for example, you see a lot of turquoise, that's been used in jewelry and all kinds of other pieces. So now let's move on to value orientation theory. We're going to start to dig deeper into the American value system here. We're going to rely on Kluckholm and Strodbeck's research there. They pose some universal questions about the United States to help understand what makes an American American. And the universal questions are 5 of them. And the first one is, what is the human being's relationship to nature? That will help define our character. It's a worldview, if you want to look at it that way. Beliefs about the cosmos, about God, if you prefer, about nature, and humanity itself. This is the worldview, like what's guiding us. Is there a purpose? Is there a maker? Those kinds of things. And in the U.S., the predominant answer to that is Christianity. It's Christianity and religion. Really, 53% of people in the United States have a belief in a religion. That's more than half. I am not in that category, by the way. I'm an atheist. I'm a very tiny minority in this country, and it's something that I traverse throughout my culture, is trying to negotiate and navigate that. You said, God bless you, right? Yeah, that was a fake sneeze. I set you up for that. It's cultural, right? It's a value. It's a human value. It's how important Christianity is to our average everyday lexicon, is that we assume that we use it no matter what a person's belief system is. But within the framework of religion, there is also the belief that human life is more valuable than animals or even nature itself. So you can be a very religious person in the United States, and you can also be a hunter because of that value. So you can be a deer hunter. That's a part of that value system. Also in the United States, we have a strong belief in the scientific method for solving problems. That was brought in by the Europeans. It's the idea that we can conduct experiments and have a control group and an experimental group and come up with a solution. That's what we're doing for a vaccine right now. We're all hopeful that these trials that are going in the second phase of the Moderna trial in England is taking place with a potential vaccine where we have a lot of belief that science can solve problems, science and technology. Also, we have a lot of consumption of media in this country. That is something that we're just doing all the time as a nation. 79% of people are on Facebook, for example. And I know in the college circuit, it's mostly Instagram and Snapchat. So, and TikTok is is rallying as well. So we just love the idea of technology and media. And then we really have to mention, as part of American culture, it doesn't make us feel good, but we still will do it. There's a large dose of materialism in this country. Owning things, the importance of owning things and showing others that you own things. That's why somebody will wear an Abercrombie and Fitch t-shirt, or Tommy Hilfiger, or whatever. People are wearing clothes to show status all the time. People driving cars to show that they own things. People are, we like to buy things. Brings us a problem too. It also means that we have a problem of disposing of all these things in landfills. It also means that we're working very hard all the time to buy things for our satisfaction. We have that saying, right? Retail therapy, right? You're in a breakup with somebody, go shopping. That's to make you feel better. All right, the next big question now, there's 5 of them that we're considering here as part of this research, is what is the modality of human activity? Like, how do people spend their time? Mostly looking at the dimension between work and play, and self-improvement is a third area. Spending time on yourself, right? In the United States, work is a fundamental part of our identity. There's a high value placed on working. And most Americans are completely unaware until they travel. It's part of this getting to know that your culture is different from others. Most Americans are completely unaware that they have a much more paltry vacation time period per year than other countries around the world, especially European countries, where the average is 5 weeks of vacation a year, mandated by federal law, like it is in Germany, 5 weeks a year. And that is because the understanding is that people, when they get time off, they come back to work more refreshed and they're better prepared to work harder. And in the US, you're fighting for 2 weeks, and even when you get those 2 weeks, you might be checking your cell phone for emails from your boss, or checking in or calling in on a Zoom call. Work is part of our identity. We have this idea that you can work hard and become successful in life, and that's what everybody should be doing. That's what we think of. And we even have something called the Protestant work ethic that's also coming over with the Puritans, the Protestant work hard. It's very important. The Harvard Business Review says that today busyness is replacing conspicuous consumption. So if you're really, really busy because of your work, it's a way of showing off that you're a successful person, to be really, really busy. And so what time is spent reflecting, Last week I went to the beach and I was like, my cell phone's, I can't really see it in the sun here. What am I going to do? I went for a swim. I'm going to sit and think. Just reflect. How often do we do that? It's like we have to be forced into those situations by extracting technology from us. All right, next up is the question is, what is the temporal focus of humans? How do they have a relationship with time, in other words? And in the U.S., time is viewed as a commodity. It's like, it's money, right? It's something that can be purchased, bought, sold. Time is money. We have that saying. Don't waste time. I mean, what a profound saying, right? Like, how could time possibly be wasted? Every moment of time should be valuable. Whether things didn't go as you wanted or not, that doesn't matter. Time is still valuable. So how can you waste time? You can waste time if you're considering that you are losing energy that could have been expended to make money. So we really believe that time is a commodity, and people are generally uncomfortable not knowing the time. Like you want to know the time. Is it 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock? That makes a big difference. I can look at the sun in the sky, but I really want to look at my cell phone and know for sure. And this also makes us divide our lives up into talking about the past, the present, and the future. It's not all just one continuous process of life. We have a past, present, and future. We look into the future, and we examine our past. So, yeah, time is a commodity. Now we're going to move on to the next question. What is the character of innate human nature? The human nature orientation. So we're drilling deeper down into trying to discuss what is that role that nature has in our lives. And again, to talk about the Puritans, they believe that people were sinners in the eyes of a God, but they have the potential to be good. But at the same time, humans were seen, even under a Puritan America, to be rational, that they can act on the basis of reason, consistent with the scientific method. So truth can be discovered both through reason and through a God, is kind of what you can say in our country. And to me, that's a big clash that I have a hard time sorting through. I told you that I'm an atheist, but I see people discussing the pandemic, and I see a lot of people on social media saying they pray for it to go away. And those same people are also sometimes posting studies talking about vaccination trials. And they are arguing that they have a belief in both science and also in a God to get us through this. And those are completely compatible belief systems for many people in this country. Finally, we can say that when we're looking at the character of innate human nature, that humans are mutable. That means that they are capable of being changed by society. We believe that. We don't believe that somebody is bad forever. Even in prisons, we believe that prisons can rehabilitate people. We believe that the military can give a young person discipline who hasn't had it. We believe that education, and you believe this, I think, otherwise you wouldn't be in this class, can improve your employment prospects. So we have this kind of, and we believe that people who have been abusive or who have been abused can be helped through therapy. It's part of our innate human nature. Now we're going to ask the question, what is the relationship of the individual to others, yourself to other people? And people we know in the United States define themselves in terms of their occupation. We've talked about that. It's about what you are doing rather than who you are in the United States necessarily. We talked about that as part of last class, and people define themselves in terms of their occupation. But in terms of the qualities that as Americans think of as having, we think of ourselves as we celebrate independence and individuality. Our most important amendment in the Constitution is the First Amendment, which guarantees our right to free speech, our ability to wear a Corona t-shirt or say whatever you want if you want to. Theoretically, not everybody will. We also celebrate competition. We know that because of our capitalist inclination towards our economy. We love competition. Sports also helps to fuel that idea. When you have a conversation with somebody else, oftentimes it's a competition. Who can tell the better story, the funnier story? Who can top the other person's experience? When it comes to the union between two people, that's a fundamental relationship that many people explore in life. They do it through the process of marriage. Some people, not all people, and marriage isn't for everybody, but they go through marriage. It's an individual's choice in this country. It's not determined for you like it is in India. And yet we expect from a religious standpoint that you're not going to move in with the other person and even if you're having sex until you are married as part of that Puritan ethic. We have this strong sense of self-concept in this country. We believe that even when we're in groups, members in groups, I'm a Philadelphia Phillies fan, or at least I was until there's no baseball, although baseball's starting back up. I still see myself as different from the other Phillies fans that I talk to. And I'm sure it's the same for you, for many groups and organizations that you believe that you belong to. Industrialization, we can't overlook industrialization, what it has done for the United States. It is made possible the mass distribution of products, but also the ability for people to work in different occupations producing those products. So we have this belief that we can rise ourselves up, that we can get jobs and improve ourselves no matter what our level of education is. Although, as we will discuss at the very end of class today, that's not really the case when you look at the hard facts when it comes to the economic breakdown of our country. We have a strong skepticism of government, going back to Massachusetts again in the Boston Tea Party and being taxed by Britain, and we didn't like that because we didn't have a vote, taxation without representation, so we threw the tea into the ocean. And ever since, we've hated taxes in this country, and part of that is because we do have this belief that government is bad, that government is scary, that government's going to come take our guns and other kinds of things that we don't want government doing. So we have a skepticism towards government. In our country, we do have a celebration of social equality. There is a high level of awareness about equality of gay rights, of racial justice, of property rights. Now, it's not to say that these things are occurring, not by any stretch, but at least we're having the conversation, right? That is a part of our belief system, that is an ideal that all sides say they aspire to. Whether they actually act that way is a different matter. And in the United States, we have to say, in part because of our mass media, in part because of industrialization, that we have a strong sense of conformity, strong sense that, my friend used to have this saying that in the U.S., you have the right to choose to be like everybody else. We're like that. We like to not be feeling as if we're being singled out. We do things that other people say. We join in with other people's sayings and, been there, done that, for example. We'll say that instead of trying to come up with our own original saying. There's not a single male in the United States Senate who has long hair. Now, how unusual is that? Why is that? Tremendous pressure to conform. So there's a lot of conformity in our culture. Now we're going to move to our final two ideas for today. And this next one is, we do have forces in our country that are pushing regional development too. Like, you don't see yourself as an American all the time. You see yourself as from different parts of the area. And so you got the industrial heartland, which used to be, the Ohios of the world, a lot of industry, car manufacturers. And now a lot of that economy is pushed out to the West Coast. And we have these regional economic centers that are like Amazon is out there and Google is out there, and they're regional. We also have what has helped regional cultures develop in our country is the integration of and equal rights towards different cultures. And so that's allowed for cultural acceptance, which is allowed for areas to flourish and celebrate their regionality. Like New Orleans, if you go to New Orleans is a feeling of Creole culture. It's celebrating black culture. It's celebrating the fusion of American black slaves and ex-slaves with the fusion of Haitians into a cuisine down there that is really unique, like jambalaya or po' boys. That's how we are dealing with integration in our country. Po' boys, that sandwich. I hope you've had one. Oyster po' boy, not to be missed. So I guess we can say that the new nations in the United States that are emerging are based around cities like the New Orleans, Philadelphia, New York, and our tourist zones like Myrtle Beach, for example, Daytona Beach. This is the new nations. All right, now let's finish up with the final idea for today, which is about social class in the United States, also building to our character. If you look flat out at the technical economic definitions, the top 1% of people, that's a capitalist class. Those people are making $2 million or more. We have that in this country. We also have an upper middle class that's 14% of the population. They're making $150,000 or more. Then we've got the middle class. The middle class is 30% of the population, with people making about $70,000. But middle class has a disproportionate perception. Everybody aspires to be in the middle class. It's kind of a conformity issue for the United States. We actually think of the middle class as being bigger than it is, bigger than that 30%, and people trying to get into it. Even the upper class, they see themselves as being middle class people, and working class people see themselves as it's an ideal more than it is a reality. Below that is the working class, below that in terms of salary. I don't mean below in terms of worth of a person, but below that is salary. Working class is 30%, making $40,000 a year. And then below that is the working poor class, 13% of the population. That's a big percentage, making just $25,000 a year and trying to survive on that. Can't imagine. 13% of our population. And then we also have an underclass, 12%. 12% of people unemployed who are part-time, making $15,000 a year. That's the student right there. You're the underclass. When you combine that with the working poor class, it's 25% of our population. That's tremendous income disparity in our nation. And we know that it has an effect on the way that people grow up and their human lives proceed. By the age of 3, children of professional parents have been exposed to 45 million words versus children of working class parents are exposed to 26 million words from their parents, I should say. So 45 million words from their parents versus 20, it's almost twice as many words of encouragement or guidance or nurturing or whatever. We can say there's a big difference right there in family relations. And middle class parents, because of that comfort that they have, they emphasize self-control in the raising of their children and intellectual curiosity more than what working class parents emphasize, and you have to decide for this for yourself, which is said to be obedience and neatness and good manners. You can think about that. Today in the United States, 20% of people are below the poverty line. And within that, there's a large segment, 42% of them are white, subjugating them to the stereotype of, quote, white trash, which is a total put down that is used to describe that particular group of people. So I don't want to end on that note. The United States is a young country. It's shown a lot of promise. It's only been around for just over 200 years. People are still coming together. The efforts are there to fix social, racial, and economic inequality. We are having those conversations. And I have to say, from a resident here in the United States, it sure is pleasing that at least we're able to have that conversation. Have a great day.